What's going on, guys? This is Rob. We are back with Jonathan Hickman's Imperial, and the ending of this is going to blow your all's minds. People are going to be ridiculously excited. So, for those of you guys who need a little bit of catching up, nothing too lengthy, the long and short of this is that someone had been traveling around the universe, killing various leaders of empires, essentially, right? So, the Incredible Hulk's son, Hiro Kala, who was leading New Sakaar, he had been assassinated. Empress Victoria, the sister of Peter Quill, who was ruling over Spartax, she had been assassinated. And so this all came to a head at the ending of the first issue, when it basically seemed like the ones behind all of this were the Wakandans and the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, specifically because Jason of Spartax, the father of Peter Quill, he'd been very publicly killed by what looked to be a Wakandan assassin, firing a Vibranium bullet. So all the clues are there. And this is why the story opens up with essentially all these other empires, the Shi'ar, the Badoon, the Kree, the Skrull, all basically waging war and getting into a conflict on Wakanda Prime. Now, for those of you guys who are not aware, yes, Wakanda has an intergalactic empire. We should probably cover that story because it's pretty dope. It's really cool that Wakanda's out in space. It's part of the aftermath from Secret Wars 2015. But the interesting thing about this, right, Wakanda was very technologically advanced and still is on Earth. And so out in space, their technology is equally advanced. So much so that these various empires that have been around for millions of years are not able to get through Wakanda Prime's defenses. And so because of the nature of the Kree and the Accuser Corps, one of the things that happens is that Oracle, basically a telepath and member of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, that she tells Gladiator, right, the one who's leading the Imperial Guard, 3 Kree strike frigates are breaking the blockade line and making for the planet. The Accusers mean to throw themselves against the shield wall and hammer it into dust. Shield nodes are compensating and they're redistributing power. And that's what Gladiator was waiting for, because once he realized that Wakanda Prime's shields are basically being maintained by a power source, the Accuser Corps, or one of these guys, would do something reckless like this, right? Prepare for ramming speed. And when that happens, they're going to have to divert energy to that part of the shield, which weakens other parts of it. Keeping in mind, Gladiator is a master strategist, but as capable as he is no master strategist against Black Panther and the Wakandans, because as soon as that opening is available, the Super Guardians go in for the attack. And that's when they get coordinates on the fact that the Black Panther is basically being removed from that area by what seems to be his own honor guard. And once they catch him, they realize it's not him. They've been lured into a trap. In fact, it's actually Shuri. And at that point, you jump to the Vibranium moon of Wakanda Prime. And that's where T'Challa's told, they've breached a section of the shield and attacked our command center. We are getting reports that they took prisoners. One of them is your sister. And so that's where the question's asked by T'Challa, right? He asks M'Baku directly how much of their fleet is still in range. And the response of M'Baku, 60% is inside the target area. But those numbers are theoretical, right? We've never tested this system before. And that's where the Black Panther is like, then we'll wait until that number reaches 70. So they're just watching everything, right? None of these empires are aware of the fact that they're being spied on by the very people that they're trying to defeat, who were not even on the planet they're attacking. And then at that point, you switch over to Richard Rider and Peter Quill. Now, these two guys are both wrestling with their own demons. And so Jonathan Hickman is very much pulling some plot strings from Annihilation. If you guys remember that story, this is literally how it opens up, right? These two guys just trying to stay alive. Peter Quill, of course, is wrestling with the fact that his sister's out of the picture and his father's dead. So he's really the leader of Spartax now. And Nova is wrestling with the destruction of the Nova Corps. Technically, that happened in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 6, but ever since then, he's kind of been on his own. Going into the events of Annihilation Scourge and so on, the fact that he's been the last remaining Nova for quite some time has kind of sent him into a state of alcoholism, which is the reason why, when the story opened up, he'd effectively been derelict in his duties as Nova. He doesn't really help protect the universe anymore. It seemed to be the only way he could cope with the constant crises and the constant death that he was surrounded by. But that's when they're informed, right? The Accusers are currently where the battle is hottest, and after them, the Shi'ar considered us the best option to debrief the prisoners, because they have Shuri in their possession. And that's when they go and have this conversation with her. Now, as you guys would truly expect, when it comes to Peter Quill and it comes to Nova, while these guys do operate on a galactic and a universal level, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, they're cops first and they're superheroes second. And what do cops do? Well, ideally, they investigate things. And so that's where, while they're talking with Shuri, they kind of let a few things slide here and there, right? Shuri's like, you do know this is going to end badly, don't you? And the response of Peter Quill, well, my father was murdered by a Wakandan assassin 3 days ago, along with the representatives of every fleet member currently surrounding your world. So yes, I agree, this is definitely going to go badly for someone. And that's where Shuri's like, that's nonsense, right? We are Wakandan, and we do not traffic in assassination. We do these things without shame and in the light. We sign our names to it. Now, right off the bat, that tells Peter Quill that something's going on here, right? Because if it was truly the Wakandans that were assassinating leaders and the Wakandans were doing it brazenly, they wouldn't deny it. I mean, it's out in the open now, right? I mean, what are they gonna do, keep lying in the face of all this evidence? So the fact that she's simply saying this seems to be that it's true, because the response of Richard Rider is, that's exactly what you did. The evidence shows it. And the response of Shuri, what evidence, right? She has no idea what they're talking about. And that right there puts on the idea the Wakandans are not behind this. Now, there is in turn the action of Black Panther, because at that point you switch back over to him and he's told, we're at 70%, my liege. The system is armed on your command. And in turn, they fire this test weapon, which is literally the moon itself. They created a Death Star, son. Now, it doesn't really like destroy everything, but it is badass that like Wakandans made a Death Star. I think I'm gonna title that the video, right? Like, Wakandans make a Death Star. But it's nuts, right? It's wild, because their goal isn't to destroy. Their goal is to neutralize. So quite literally, it's basically a targeted EMP. They shut down all the ships within their blast range. They're just floating dead through space. The people on them are alive, right? We don't know for how long, but like they're floating through space and there's nothing they can do. So like that, Black Panther neutralized 60% of the Empire's fleets that were attacking Wakanda Prime. It's pretty insane. It's pretty insane here. And that's where you switch over to the Shi'ar, right? And Oracle tells Gladiator it's the same all across the fleet. Most of the vessels are on emergency power, ship to ship, broadcasting only. Wideband is erratic. Right, then he talks to Smasher, right, the only human to join the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. That, of course, happened during Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, but she says, like, I'm seeing Wakanda frigates inbound from the moon and the planet below. We're gonna be boarded, right? And that's where the question is like, what are your orders, Gladiator? And he's like, can we contact the magistrates, right? The leader of the Shi'ar. And the response is yes, right? And some good news there. The magistrate ship was outside the attack vector. It's still under full power, connecting us now. Because here's an important thing to understand. Despite how powerful Gladiator is, because he's one of the many allegories that Marvel has for Superman in Marvel Comics, his duty is to the preservation of the Empire above all else, even if that means sacrificing his own life. And so his only concern is to make sure that Xandra Naramani, the leader of the Shi'ar Empire, is kept safe. And that's why he says, I will hold them off as best I can. Get to the Stargate, get out of here, and I will come and find you if I survive. But the reality here is it seems like a death mission, right? There's no real way for them to come out on top here. The funny thing about this is that the first ship, or one of the first ships that's boarded by the Wakandan forces, is actually the Rigelian Man-O-War. The funny thing is that when Black Panther and his forces get onto this ship, they're met with the arrival of Hulk, right? Because keep in mind, the whole reason the Incredible Hulk is even involved in all of this is because of the fact that his son Hero Kala was killed. And that was kind of our initial linchpin and entry into the story. The son of Hulk is killed, the Hulk goes to investigate, and then it turns out his son was poisoned, and now we're here. So it's kind of the crazy thing, right, with his involvement. And so at that point, you switch over to Shuri, and specifically, you kind of kick things off with Peter Quill, who's being told that something's happened. Everything has gone quiet and most of the fleet appears to be adrift, powerless and helpless. And so that's where Peter's like, okay, like we're on our way back up. And so that's where things get cool, because where they initially tell Shuri, like, we don't have time for this whole thing. Like, we have to get topside and we got to figure out what's going on with all these ships out there, that Shuri's like, no, you need to stay down here, right? You have to wait, because is this all the evidence that you have? And that's where Noah's like, I mean, do you think that it's not enough? And she says, the money looks real. The transfer is not fraudulent. And she's like, I need to let my brother know about that. But the rest, the vibranium bullets, they're counterfeit, right? And they're like, I mean, can you prove that? And she's like, of course I can. Like, I'm Wakandan. Vibranium is our thing. Like, why wouldn't I be able to? She's like, of course they got away with it. How would you know any different? This is the weakness of being a society that holds its secrets close. The metallurgical signature matches neither Wakanda Prime nor Earth, so it's been fabricated. It's expensive, astronomically more expensive than the real thing, but you can produce a vibranium yield from any number of base metals. Titanium and vanadium have the most stable result, but the signature is obvious if you know what you're looking for. This is all a ruse. In essence, she's like, we've been framed and someone is toying with us. Now, that's the other part of the story, right? We learned that in the first issue. There is a game afoot. There's two people involved here who are playing this game with the universe itself, and we don't know who they are, and we don't know why they're doing it. Now, this is where the story goes off the rails, because at that point, you switch over to M'Baku. Because one of the things that goes on here is that M'Baku says they fight and they die in fire and folly and the fragile way that men can be broken. And one of the other guys says, Bass protect them all. And the response of M'Baku, right, like, you're wasting your breath on prayers. I'm sure every single loved one of those who are out there dying lifted up their names to whatever gods they worship, saved them, protect them, and yes, the gods may hear, but they will not listen, because they know this is what men really worship: conquest. The universe is dark and violent, minister, and religion no longer matters. And that's where the minister says, you're wrong, M'Baku, it does to some of us. And then he says, for Virenki lives and will live forever. Only for us to find out, the guy's a Skrull. He's a Skrull duplicate, right? They immediately stab M'Baku on the spot, and they're like, and here's for what you worship, right? More silver, a traitor's gift for a traitor's life. Not only that, you end up finding out there's a boatload of Skrulls on the Wakanda ship. Black Panther has inadvertently left his forces to be killed by Skrulls. And one of them asked the question, right, is it time? And the other, the word was given, the signs written in the stars. When Dorek the Eighth dies, then the Kree-Skrull alliance is no more. The old ways will return. I feel pride down to my bones. How many are we? And the response, we are legion in every ship and in every land. We simply wait for the word. And then he says, then I give you the word. Virenki. And then in turn, they launch their attack. All the Skrulls start manifesting across every ship, right? Dropping their ruses and going after everybody. Now, here's the importance of this, specifically Virenki, right? Those of you guys who aren't really familiar with her character, Virenki's biggest moment was that she was the one that led the secret invasion of Earth. But Virenki goes back before that, right? That way back in the day, after Galactus had destroyed the throne world of the Skrulls, that Virenki had actually predicted it, right? Galactus will come for us. Galactus will destroy us. We need to figure something out. And ultimately, she was ignored. It was just kind of the ravings of a madwoman, of a heretic. But then when it all actually happened, people went to her side, right? And she in turn became the new leader of the Skrull race. Now, ultimately, of course, she was defeated and killed, and that was basically it. And there is certainly more to the story than I'm explaining here, right? But if you're curious, all that was covered through a combination of Bendis's Illuminati run and the Secret Invasion storyline. But the fact that she seems to be back and is unifying the Skrulls, well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that this is a Secret Invasion event. A secret invasion is one of the things that's taking place. Following that, you jump from Black Panther back to the Hulk, right? And you just kind of go back and forth with these guys. The Black Panther is able to hold his own, right? And it's one of the cool things, right? He's well aware of how to counter the Hulk, even when the Hulk is incredibly strong, right? And where he literally takes his sword and just like hacks at the Hulk's arm, the Hulk is just like, I felt that, right? And then grabs Black Panther and flings him into a wall, all the way to the point where like he has his hand on his face and has him pinned against the wall, right? Seemingly dead to rights. What does Black Panther do? He teleports out. It's just one of the small little dope moments, right? I really wish we would get a more complex fight between the Hulk and Black Panther, because one of the things that goes on is that between the two of them, this great big huge conflict that's going on, suddenly they're called off the fight with each other because the Skrulls are launching their attack. And again, it's happening everywhere. It's happening on the Kree ship, it's happening with the Shi'ar, it's happening with the Chameleons, that the Skrulls have secretly infiltrated every ship in these galactic empires. And that's where Gladiator is just like the Skrulls, right? It's like a return of a dormant virus. Secure the bridge, Super Guardians. And then he just says, Mentor, reach out to Deathbird, see if you can reach the Magistrix, because if Skrulls are here, Skrulls are most likely there. But Skrulls are not the thing that Magistrix has to worry about, right? Not only that, switching back to Peter Quill, right, and to Nova, the Skrulls, of course, manifest on their ship. Now, Shuri helps them to basically take these guys out, and then it's kind of like, okay, cool. So let's focus on what's actually going on here, right? Someone somewhere is playing a gigantic game. We need to go figure out who it is that's playing this game. The other thing that goes on here is that while the Skrulls are technically on the ship of Magistrix Zandra, right, so the throne ship for the leader of the Shi'ar, not all these Skrulls that are here are Skrulls. Because one of the things that happens, right, is that in the midst of what seems to be a Skrull attack against Zandra, one of them asks the question, you think the Skrulls are your problem? We are Shi'ar hobgoblins. So literally the Shi'ar have their own shapeshifters, and they have for quite some time. But this is not simply Shi'ar forces coming to the aid of Zandra and Deathbird, because they wipe out pretty much all the Skrulls on the ship. And even Zandra says, like, I don't understand, right? And Deathbird's like, Super Guardians, what's the meaning of this? What is happening here? They're actually told it's a coup. That what these Shi'ar are doing is they're launching a coup against the Magistrix. They mean to take control of the Empire for themselves. Not only that, the person doing it actually has a legitimate claim to the throne, because this is Electron. Now, we'll talk more about him here in a second, but those of you guys who are old school X-Men fans, going back to issue number 107 from Chris Claremont, you guys know who Electron is. He's a long-standing member of the X-Men lore. So the cool thing about this is, of course, it allows Peter Quill and Richard Rider to basically reach the Stargate and to kind of get out of all the chaos and all the pandemonium that's happening out there, which ultimately brings us to who it is that's doing all of this. And in fact, Richard Rider is the one that gets us there. Because one of the things that happens is that they end up flying by Fulcrum Station, which was kind of the great big huge meeting ground where all these empires were in the first place. The assassination of Jason of Spartax took place there. And so all these people are in a state of panic. But as you guys know, word travels fast. So the best place to broadcast the truth of what's actually happening here, or at least as they see it, is the place where all the rumors are stemming from. And so they tell everybody, right, what seems to be going on here is some kind of a ruse. We don't know who's behind it, but someone's instigating effectively a universal civil war among all the empires of the universe. They want to see us destroy ourselves. We're going to go figure out who it is, but until we do, please try not to destroy each other. Please try not to go crazy. And so at that point, Peter Quill, Shuri, and Nova end up at the remains of Xandar. Now, Xandar hasn't been a thing for quite some time. And like I mentioned earlier, the Guardians of the Galaxy have not been a thing for quite some time. But there is a reason why they are here. Because as soon as they get out of this, Nova is just like, follow me, right? And immediately they end up heading to the treasury of Xandar, only to find out that what is there is actually a helmet of Nova, right? The Nova Prime helmet. But it's more than that, right? Because he says it's the Xandarian world mind. And the question they have is, okay, cool, well then put it on, right? Because the Xandarian world mind basically has cosmic awareness, for lack of a better word. So it'll be able to tell us immediately what all's going on, who's playing this game. But that's where Richard Rider is like, maybe I haven't been clear. There's a reason I or any survivors of our empire have not done this yet. This is the only backup of the global consciousness of Xandar. And right now, the world mind is dormant. It's stable, but it's inactive. Once I activate it and it powers on, there's no returning to a dormant state. That would be the same as killing it. So what Jonathan Hickman is basically doing is laying the groundwork for the idea that if Richard Rider puts this helmet on, Richard Rider goes back to being Nova, and Richard Rider will never not be Nova again, which is great if you're a Richard Rider fan, but it also sucks because you know Marvel's going to come back at some future point in time and screw it up. But he says, if I take this helmet off, if I lose the world mind, we would lose the only archive of our culture, everything that was gone forever. So if I turn it on, I have to keep it on. The energy costs to do so are almost unimaginable. And he's like, it'll cost money, lots of money forever, until it can build some kind of replacement system or a container. And so that's where Shuri's like, we have to know what's happening here. And this is the only tool for us to be able to figure that out. You have to turn it on. And the response of Richard Rider, can you promise me that Wakanda will provide what I need to keep it that way? But keep in mind, T'Challa is the ruler of Wakanda, both in name and designation. This is not one of these things post, Doom War, where he is the ceremonial Black Panther and Shuri is the leader of Wakanda. No. We're not playing that game anymore, right? And so she's like, I cannot speak for my brother, no, but I will promise to do all that I can. And the response of Nova, not good enough, right? That's not nearly good enough. Right? I need to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that with all your technological advancement, you can make this happen. But that's where Peter Quill kind of talks him into it, because he says, okay, well, my father's gone, and my sister probably isn't going to make it either, right? She's poisoned and suffering the effects of it. We've got her in suspended animation, which means that if I want it, the entire throne of Spartax is mine, along with all the wealth that comes with it. And I did say, I love the sound of credits running through my fingers. I can make this right, pal. I got your back, right? If Wakanda won't do it, I will. And so Richard Rider is like, deal, throws the helmet on and is like, I know who's doing this, right? So we get Richard Rider back. We get like the Richard Rider, like not the guy who's just a drunk trying to cope with this. No, the Richard Rider, right? Because immediately when that happens, we get the Xandarian world mind. Hello, Nova Rider. It's been a while. And so at that point, it's like, look, we can't deal with the pleasantries. What's going on here, right? Like, can you tell me what's happening? And so the world mind's like, of course I can help you, but it will take roughly 1/3 of all power reserves that I currently have. Should I proceed? The response of Nova, yes. And so in turn, that's when he learns everything that's going on. And that's when you switch back, you jump back to 1 year ago, and you get a meeting between the Grandmaster, which I told you guys at the very beginning of this series, this is something the Grandmaster would do, and Maximus the Mad of the Inhumans, son. The Inhumans are coming back, right? So here's the crazy thing about this. The two of them kind of agree to play this game together. They're the two behind all of this. Now, of course, as you guys know, the Grandmaster never plays any kind of a game unless what he would win if he won is worth playing the game in the first place. And that's where you get the stakes of what's happening. That Maximus says, if you win, then I will gift you with the long-held secrets of Terrigenesis, along with all existing records of Inhuman genealogy, which I know you want. If I win, you owe me a favor to be named at a later date. And where Grandmaster is like, yeah, but you never seek the favor of anybody. The response of Maximus, I mean, that's true. And so that's where the Grandmaster is like, so I then, of course, must suspect this is a ruse of some sort, which offers its own amusement, I suppose. But that isn't what truly interests me. It's the challenge. Now, what's the game they're playing here? That what Maximus the Mad wants is a war in the universe. Specifically, he wants this war to spark, right? To actually happen within 1 year. Because the initial response of the Grandmaster is like, look, I'm billions of years old. Inevitably, wars always break out. So sure, I mean, I can play this game if you're interested, right? But the challenge comes in the fact that he has to fast track it. He has to figure out a way to destroy alliances. Because keep in mind, the Kree and the Skrull alliance has been a thing ever since they were unified by Hulkling, right? They've been unified for quite some time. The other part of this is that the Shi'ar doesn't really have a reason to go to war with any of the other empires that are out there. The Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda is currently in the process of growing itself, and while it could certainly hold its own against other empires, as you've seen, they don't really have a reason to go to war. So the universe is at peace. How do you spark a war among empires in a universe that's at peace? And that's what the Grandmaster hits on. He was like, do not let that peace fool you. The reality here is that all these empires will inevitably go to war because it is in the nature of mortal men. It's in the nature of life to fight with itself for whatever reason is deemed fit at that particular point in time. Because when Maximus asked the Grandmaster to explain what his intention is, right, what his plan is, right, with this kind of game and all these little pieces on the board and so on and so forth, is he says, what we are doing is telling a story to all those who will be caught up in the web of it. And like any story well told, the path our players take should appear to be self-determined while it is anything but. So while they work from a beginning, the murders we will give them, we work backward from a desired end state. And just so, their efforts, guided by our hand, will lead to a conclusion predetermined by us. What's kind of ironic about this statement from the Grandmaster is, as I understand it, that's how Hickman writes his stories. He starts with the ending and then works his way back to the beginning, because it's much easier and basically better to tell a complex narrative if you already know how you want it to end, because then it's just a matter of figuring out how to get there, as opposed to just starting with a pen to paper and then potentially writing yourself into a box somewhere along the way. And so that's why the Grandmaster continues on. He says, some people see free people with hopes and dreams, but all I see are pawns to be moved hither and yonder, right? Speaking about the various races that exist in the universe. And he says, listen closely, child. I am an elder of the universe. I have seen galactic empires rise and fall. I have seen worlds born and their nourishing sons cease to exist. My life has been measured in eons, and I have spent all that time doing one thing, being a player of games. I have dedicated my life to it, and there is none better. This is art, and I am a master of my craft. And the response of Maximus, then show me. And so that's where Grandmaster turns to the Shi'ar, and he says, lesser players might begin by stoking the fires of external conflicts, deep-seated hatreds that are, in some instances, thousands and thousands of years old. However, I see a board with strong pieces in stable positions able to withstand such outside influences, but I do see the opportunity for internal pressure, beginning with the most warlike race, the Shi'ar. Their 10,000 worlds are ripe for a class rebellion. The people have always barely tolerated the heavy hand of the dynastic Naramani, but for the first time, that number now extends to the Imperial Guard itself. Don't you understand? Innovation has always been the enemy of loyalty. The number of decommissioned Super Guardians has increased recently as newer models have replaced the growing obsolescent older warriors of the Annihilation and Ascension Wars. So it is with great folly that the next Super Guardian class scheduled for retirement is Electron, for it is one of the very few classes where a common, true-born Shi'ar citizen can join the Imperial Guard. They undergo an empowerment process so they might stand tall beside their more naturally gifted Super Guardian brothers and sisters. And what if I told you that this current, soon-to-be cast-aside Electron was rumored to be the secret son of the Mad Emperor Dekin? Suppose if, by his blood, he had a true claim to the throne, and, should he rebel, a small army of cast-aside guardians would join him. And what if we whispered in his ear a secret plan, not just to right this wrong, but deliver the same justice throughout the universe? Now, here's what the Grandmaster's talking about. A lot of you guys know about the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas in Marvel Comics, right? Jean Grey's ascension to power, becoming the Phoenix, all that kind of cool stuff. The thing about that is, before any of that happened, Dekin, the brother of Lalandra, was the emperor, right? The magister of the Shi'ar Empire. Ultimately, he was defeated in some mad power grab to seize control of the M'Kraan crystal. When that happened, his sister took his place, so she was never truly the rightful heir of the throne of the Shi'ar. But with this idea, going back to Uncanny X-Men 107, that Electron, the original Electron, was basically the son, or at least appeared to be the son of Dekin, he always had a claim to the throne. He was always the legitimate ruler here. And because of the fact that Naramani is so young, right? Zandra is so young and so inexperienced and relies so heavily on the advice from Gladiator, Mentor, and Deathbird, a lot of those individuals out there in the Shi'ar Empire do not feel she's a capable leader. And so ultimately the Grandmaster is just like, let's fix that. Let's basically incite a coup d'etat. It's what Dr. Doom did in Wakanda in Doom War. That's where you see all these strings being pulled from. And so that's why Maximus asks, and where might this influence spread? And the response of Grandmaster, I would insist that it be the Kree chain around the Skrull necks. The belief that a tenuous union between a devout diaspora and a hawkish technocracy could be held together by a boy king was always laughable. And as the Imperial hobgoblin shapeshifters are as undetectable to the Skrulls as the Skrulls are to all all of us, it would be a true, very believable miracle that their holy Empress Ferengi, resurrected and reborn in all her glory, has returned to preach the good word of righteousness, revolution, and liberty. So it's not actually Ferengi, it's just being made to look like her. That's part of the ruse. And he says, how else would her people respond except with religious fervor? What would be more natural than a second, more aggressive secret Skrull invasion? And in the halls of power and at the levers of hundreds of societies, my Skrull seeds will flower. And so picking up 11 months later, he says, do you see the poisons, those who paid for them, the bullets, the fingers that pulled the trigger, all vectors leading to a single vanishing point. And so it comes to this, an inflection point, when all eyes turn and shadows rise to reveal the real enemy. And he says, you have to understand, all conflict spins on the axis of scarcity. It breeds contempt among so-called allies that they dare to have something that you do not, especially when the survival of a society depends on it. And blind men hate the truth. And so he says, take another look. A new alliance of worlds constructed on the back of an enhanced Stargate system dependent on Vibranium, a rare element that naturally only exists inside the boundaries of Imperial Wakanda. Do you see how quickly the alliance's member nations all aligned against them? Do you see how quickly they chose war? Now, what he's talking about here is this. The Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda is the new kid on the block, and the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda did introduce a Stargate system across the universe, but you have to be an ally of the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda to be able to use them effectively. But the larger picture that's being painted by Grandmaster here is that the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda seems to be positioning itself in such a way that they're trying to make other empires dependent on them. And even if that's not necessarily the case, the Grandmaster means to make it look that way. So what's basically happening now, right, with the idea of a Wakandan assassin killing Jason of Spartex, is it makes it look like now the Wakandans are trying to seize power, make them out to be the enemy, and everybody will immediately attack them because they already distrusted them in the first place. And he says, the Wakandans had leverage, but I used it against them. The Skrulls had fervor and a righteous cause. Just look at what a mockery I have made of it. The Shi'ar had plans within plans, and now they have boxed themselves in. And you had a wager with your betters. You dared to play the Grandmaster, and so at the end, we come to this, a perfectly played game, painted across the canvas of cold, unforgiving space. I chose the players, I chose the board, and as such, I cannot lose. And so where Maximus is like, well done, right? Like, this is actually impressive. Within the span of 11 months, you instigated a war among the empires of the universe. Here's the cool thing about this, right? That Maximus is like, I will prepare the Inhuman genetic records along with all we possess regarding Terrigenesis. And the response to the Grandmaster, keep it. Right? I don't want any of that stuff. And none of that matters to me. All I care about is the challenge. It never mattered to me. But the reality here is this is my game, and we are playing it on my terms. So watch as I pull a singular piece and undo everything that I've done. End this war that you wanted to see so badly. Now, of course, that goes against the plans of Maximus, because here's a funny thing about Maximus the Mad. He is to never be underestimated. And in so many ways, he's kind of like the Inhumans' own version of Loki. And that's why he says, listen closely, Elder. I am a royal of the Inhumans. I too have seen galactic empires rise and fall. Our own was one of them. And as such, it sits poorly with us. But now we change all of that. For I have spent all my time doing two things, being a liar and being a cheat. I have dedicated my life to it, and there is none better. It is art, Elder, and I am a master of my craft. And he says, look, it seems to me you've missed a piece. That piece being Black Bolt of the Inhumans. And he says, there's one more king on the board. And at that moment, Lockjaw teleports Black Bolt in. And like literally Grandmaster's like, what the hell is going on here? And Maximus is like, would you imagine that, right? The Grandmaster didn't see this coming. The guy who's a master of playing games suddenly left confused and feeling left-footed. And so that's where Maximus tells Black Bolt, tell him who's really in charge, brother. And Black Bolt just whispers to Grandmaster and sends him flying, right? Just literally, that's the end of him. And so at that point, Maximus is like, okay, so what do you want to do? I mean, it happened rather well, but like, I mean, what do you want to do, right? Are you sure that you want to take things further? He says, after all, we could just spend a few more years wandering the universe, the very best of brothers, in search of enlightenment, or better yet, good old-fashioned fun. So do we keep this going, or do we just kind of let things end and walk away? And Black Bolt just looks at him, because Black Bolt has a reason for being here. The reason being the restoration of the Inhuman Empire. Because at that point, Maximus is like, fine, have it your way. Let's go get you an empire. The Inhumans are coming back, son, and I am so excited. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.